What's going on, guys? It's AJ here with the Breaking Point podcast. Today we have a very, very special guest. We have Weston Bergmann. Most of you guys know him from the Real World, Road World Challenge, or The Challenge is your most recent one, right? But actually, I had the pleasure of going on Wes's new show called the Blox. And what an amazing experience it was. It opened up a whole new view of how I see Wes, and it's crazy because I feel like the persona you have normally does not even display 10% of your intelligence, you know, on these shows and stuff like that. And so it was amazing getting to see kind of behind the curtain. And here we talk about everything fitness and business. So, you know, who better than to bring the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Weston Bergmann. Welcome to the show. Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much. I am honored.
Oh man, you humble me. I'm honored significantly for you coming on. I know you're a very busy man, and I appreciate you taking the time. This is amazing.
Yeah, of course.
Awesome. So let's dabble into, you know, what kind of your experience on the reality TV shows you've been on, and kind of how that's led you. Obviously, that gives you great social proof, great, you know, a great, for lack of a better term, I guess, audience of great exposure, right? But yeah, I feel like you did that, and I could be wrong here, but I feel like you did that to push your bigger agenda, and that's, you know, helping people in business, helping people start up, and fueling your incubator.
Well, okay, let's start something. I went on reality television as a 19-year-old boy with the intention of getting laid more often, and that worked. That was an incredibly successful mission accomplished, laid by anyone and everyone. So it was quite nice. But then I was able to kind of figure out, after being on these recurring roles, I've been doing them for almost 20 years now, about 20 seasons of television. And I've been able to use it as a lily pad to kind of do all sorts of other things. And so, like, when it comes to this podcast, like you said, we're talking about a little bit of TV. And so that's the credibility there. I've been on TV forever. Am I considered like a reality television icon? Then there's the business stuff. And I know, like, it's kind of hard to get credibility in business when you're on television. But here's the deal. If you're like a little sketched out, like, oh, is this reality guy? Nobody's talking to him. It's like, well, my company did over $100 million last year. I own part of over 300 companies. I own one of the largest business incubators in the world. And I'm changing the way that we're mentoring startups at scale. So you got to get on my train, or just, you know, we're gonna leave you at the station. And then when it comes to fitness, you know, I was on a world-class Olympic level swim program. I was on an Olympic level soccer program, and I was also a track star, and have officially on international television beat a hurdler that was in the Olympics at hurdles in hurdles. So, like, I'm good in the water, I'm good on the land, I'm good with a team, and I'm good with the ball. And my favorite modality of all is lifting weights. And so when it comes to this podcast, that's why I was chosen. I sit at the intersection of all of these things, and I just spent 7 straight days with you in my hometown, in my home for some of it, at my office. I mean, and so I know AJ better than a lot of y'all know AJ, 100%. And I mean that in a very good and complimentary way.
I would hope so. You know, we did have Temper's flair. I had Temper's flair a little bit on the show. We got tired. You know, it wasn't my best foot forward, but man, you were an amazing mentor, and I'm so happy I got to spend that time with you, you know, but you're exactly right.
Yeah, without giving any spoilers, because the thing hasn't aired, and obviously I want all you guys to watch AJ eventually, whenever this airs, when our show airs, which won't be that far from now. You know, AJ came out with a very, like, athletic viewpoint, like a sports mentality, which I understand. And he made basically the same exact mistake that I made on my first show. So on my first show, I was like fresh out of sports, and I go on and there's all these people that aren't necessarily athletes. Then I'm like, why are you not taking this seriously? I'm yelling at them. I'm doing all this stuff. And it's like, I'm still apologizing for some of my behavior, which was like 15 plus years ago. And it's just, there's not necessarily anything wrong that I did or anything wrong that you did. It's just you got really competitive. And as the guy that created a game, I need people like y'all to get competitive. And so even though I know that you're a dramatically more laid back and normal life, I personally was privileged to get to see the like in the game AJ. And I think that it made all of us, including you, level up.
Oh, I definitely feel like I leveled up, and I definitely hope, I hope anybody else level up at the show. And but you're 100% right. We come from athletic backgrounds. We come from these like crazy competitive environments, and then I'm in a room with 60 entrepreneurs, and everyone else. I personally felt like I was the most competitive person in the room, towards the end. But yeah, no, it was an amazing experience. It was like, man, I'm glad we can make good TV, like ultimately. Yeah. But no, I've been ranting about it since I've been back. I've been talking about all the significant things I've learned. Like, I'm in my doctorate in business, right? So yeah. I'm like, didn't know too much about you, besides the public perception, which now I feel like I know significantly more. You and I had some amazing topic or conversations, and like, I truly feel like you are a mentor in my eyes, and I hope I get to be your mentee for a long time. But no, I've been ranting and raving. I came back with a whole different energy, a whole different vibe. It was just, I can't describe it enough. I think we're confusing the audience a little, because you and I know what we're talking about, right? When we speak on business incubators, right? Like, I know where you're coming from, especially now I know where you're coming from. Obviously, you're the master at this. I don't think our audience knows what a business incubator is.
Yeah, a business incubator is like sometimes a virtual, but more often than not a in-person kind of office-esque environment where startups and small businesses come inside of it. And then inside of it, guys like me as the incubator provide things to accelerate their growth and increase the likelihood of their success and the speed at which it takes to get there. We do that by providing, or at least I can speak on behalf of us. There's all sorts of weird incubators and accelerators out there, but what we do is we provide a year of appointed mentorship, access to investors, office space, and the idea is that we're almost like a co-founder of sorts that wants none of the credit. So, when guys like you have like these, it is what it is. Every day you have new hard questions that emerge. And sometimes, you don't want to go to your employees to ask those questions. You can't go to your normal friends because, with all due respect, you don't want to get entrepreneurship advice from someone that's never started a business. And so you start looking around the room in your life, and it's like, who do you go to with these really hard questions that's not going to judge me or call me crazy or try and tell me to get a job? And we're the answer, is what it boils down to. And then we take, for my bread and butter product that I've been doing for 12 plus years, we take 5% ownership of every startup that comes through our doors, which means we kind of work for them forever in the hopes that one day they'll grow up so big that they get acquired for some exorbitant amount of money, and we take 5% cut on that day. But then over time we created, I've always had this idea of combining my two worlds of this business incubator environment with all the skills that I learned from television. And so that's where we created the Blox. So, which is what you went on, which is like a very, very immersive, accelerated version of our incubator. You didn't give us 5% ownership of your business, so I own none of your company. But in that week, we film you and a bunch of other entrepreneurs going through a series of classes and consults and group workshops, and we're ranking you and quantifying you in various kind of tests and pitches. And it turns like the concept of a business incubator, and it turns it into a game. So that way a viewer is entertained by what would normally be a pretty nerdy and boring subject, with the aim that because we're making it entertaining, then people will actually watch it. And if they watch it, they're accidentally learning. And so we're trying to like take the barriers of entry to learning about how to start a startup correctly away completely. It's like, now it's free to watch the show. All you need is an internet connection. You can watch it on Facebook. You can watch it on either of our apps. And so instead of having to get into our like incredibly exclusive program to get, I've denied over 10,000 people in person to their face over the last decade. And so it's not easy to get in. And so I wanted to make sure that those types of folks that maybe just weren't quite ready for a very exclusive thing can be flies on the wall of kind of like yours and I's experience, and learn from, basically learn alongside and watch you and your pitches and watch you and your consults and kind of glean some information there. And that's the aim of it all, to a certain extent. Like, a really cheesy way of putting it is, I'm trying to be, not me personally, but our brand as the Blox, we want to be like the Bill Nye the Science Guy, but for startups and for adults, where Bill Nye made science education fun so kids actually paid attention. Well, we want to make startup education fun so adults that are starting companies actually pay attention, and therefore more people will start companies. And my political opinion is, the more entrepreneurs that are out there, the better for America. And so that's the long-term kind of big leave my dent on the world type of explanation of what we're doing.
100%. You said some great things. I mean, I think the first one that stood out is, your friends will call you crazy when you have bigger ideas, and I've dealt with it my whole life, from the degrees I pursued, starting with my exercise science degree. What are you going to do with that? Personal trainers don't make any money. Like, nobody could grasp the bigger picture, the bigger vision, because it scares them. And I think one of the biggest takeaways that you get going on the Blox and, being around 60 entrepreneurs, being around you, is nobody there thinks you're crazy, right? Like, everybody has these like crazy big dreams, and it was just so supportive. If for a competitive environment, I'm not used to this in a competitive environment at all, but everyone's just like super supportive of one another, right? And you hit the nail on the head, man. Like, we don't have anybody to talk to. And that's why it's the 1% of the world, right? That, who do we go to? Your friends will look at you glazed over. I get in business arguments with people all the time, and like, I stopped arguing at this point, because it's like, I'm no longer gonna argue with you when you literally haven't done anything in business, like. And so just having that experience, I think the show is not only gonna help people who want to start a business, but I think it's going to actually maybe overcome that the stereotype that you're crazy if you do want to start a business, right? I mean, you're seeing everybody from A to Z, all sorts of different types of personalities, different walks of life, different scale of businesses, all seeing on the show. And maybe somebody that I thought it was impossible when I was in the Army, and then I started working for these guys that were complete idiots, and I'm like, man, if these guys can make 7 figures a year, running their business, and these guys are, fell into a trust fund, and they somehow made it work, and they had some of the dumbest ideas I've ever heard in my entire life. I was just like, what, like, that was my breaking point. And I think the show is going to be a breaking point for everyone else to be like, hey, this is possible. It doesn't matter where you come from. You don't have to come from rich parents, for sure.
Yeah, no, very much so. Not at all. And, I hope that people that have a desire to start a business don't ever feel crazy, whether it's before they've started or after they've started. So part of what we're here for is a little bit to reassure you that you're not crazy. And also, if you don't want to start a business, you shouldn't feel crazy about that either. Good employees of large and medium-sized companies are also incredibly important for our economy and important to entrepreneurs, because if everyone started their own business, then we would have no employees. So it doesn't matter which of those routes you're in, just don't feel crazy. It's okay. And don't throw stones at the other side. Like, the civilians, don't throw stones at the entrepreneurs, and entrepreneurs don't throw stones at the civilians. And also, like, you need to, know your stripes, like which one of those you are, stay in your lane. 100%. And regardless, don't feel crazy, because you're not crazy. These are just different, options of which way you want to take your life. And a non-entrepreneur being an entrepreneur would be miserable, and an entrepreneur being an employee would be miserable. So know your stripes, and stick with, where your heart tells you should be.
100%. I can't even imagine a world where I go work for somebody again. Like, that's like, so, but entrepreneurship's hard in its own right. Everyone, this is my favorite line I get from everybody. Oh, you're so lucky you get to make your own schedule. Like, no, I don't make my own schedule. My business makes my schedule. Like, whatever's necessary is necessary.
No, you get to work whatever 10 hours a day you choose. whichever ones. And
100%.
it's like, yeah, so kind of, yeah, I do. I get to pick which 12 hours I work, and a day.
Yeah.
And yeah,
7 days a week for the most
kinda.
part.
Yeah,
Dude,
yeah,
and
7 days. It's so crazy. Like it is a lot of effort. There's no doubt about that. But it's so very fulfilling to be able to make money from something that was a kernel of an idea in your head, and that it makes it to where it doesn't feel like work. That doesn't mean that you're not tired. It doesn't mean that it's not hard. It's just there's a level of fulfillment out of that kind of makes up for the lack of work-life balance.
yeah, when we lay our heads on our pillows at night, we knew we accomplished something, we achieved something. We're not just and this is no offense to anybody who's working for anybody else to any extent, but we're not another cog in the machine. We're the one operating the machine, and that's a great feeling. It's if you're doing it for the right reasons. Obviously
Yeah.
we all want to make money, but I feel like entrepreneurs that have a deeper reason for why they're doing what they're doing, it makes getting out of the rough easier. Because your first couple of years in entrepreneurship, and I'm sure you could speak to this significantly more than anybody else because of how large of a company you built, you're on the verge of wanting to quit every single day. You have every single reason not to. And, I've been saying this a lot since I came back from the box, but I'm like, I only keep people in my life to have reasons to do things instead of excuses on why they can't anymore. And that was something being around you and being around, everyone else really taught me.
Well, I also, and this took a long time to kind of get to when I was your age, and I'm not that much older than you, but when I was your age, it was almost like that too. It was like, I only want to be around people that are like hyper ambitious and are fellow entrepreneurs and all this kind of stuff. And you can burn out really quickly. And I really hope my normal friends don't watch this, but I really, really need them to occasionally check out and do Nimrod shit occasionally, right?
1,000%.
Where like maybe every other week I'm able to get together with them and we drink some beers and we talk about nothing, like cars or girls or whatever life. And it's like, and it takes me an hour, sometimes two, to get out of business thinking in my head. But when I'm out of it, I need that time with them. And thankfully, they don't want to talk about ambition. They don't want to talk about what's next. And I need them. Now, that said, I also need my entrepreneurship support group where I've got like basically 5 guys. We get together occasionally. We'll smoke cigars or drink scotch or we'll whatever. We sit around in a circle, and there is no how's life, how's your wife. There's none of that. It's just we go around in a circle. We talk about business. Each person gets a kind of set amount of time where they're kind of in charge, and we just kind of let them vent, and we ask very Socratic questions or possibly provide some tidbits of advice, and then it kind of changes. And that is also necessary. So I personally need both support groups, the kind where I can like mentally completely check out and just kind of be a normal person. And then the type where I have access to kind of a professional support. And both are crucial to me.
100% same here. I shut my brain down every night playing video games, and that's because if I don't spend an hour playing video games, I'm not sleeping. My brain's going. And so you definitely need both. I guess more so what I was saying was, what I noticed is a really easy habit to fall into with people who come up with an excuse for everything, why they can't do things. And this isn't necessarily entrepreneurship or anything, just everything in general. Like you're trying to hang out, they always have a reason why they can't. And I kind of had to eliminate because I fell into that habit where it'd be like, oh, I need to go do this for my business, and I'd be like, oh, but I'm tired today, I'm sore today, and I was coming up with reasons why not to do things instead of reasons to do things. I think it's just highly, and this isn't saying they have to be an entrepreneur or think that way. I think generally happy and energetic people typically want to do that. They want to do more.
Yeah.
But you definitely need both support groups, like by far. Yeah. You can't talk shop. But unfortunately, and no offense to anybody in my life, I don't have many people that, I can do the entrepreneurial thing with. That understand it on a scientific level or even a practical level. And I think that's one thing that you hit insanely well. Once again, when I went to show, I'm like, man, I'm in my doctorate in business. There's not gonna be any subjects they could teach me that I haven't covered. Like I've already been through, done this. And I was wrong. I was wildly wrong, right? Like every day was just because the difference between how you teach and what you teach versus how you learn in business school and anything like that is you've done it. Those professors haven't. Everything you're teaching is practical, not based off the science of the matter, and that was so, so crucial. Every day I felt like I left with a wealth of knowledge, and that was freaking amazing. How do you develop your curriculum? How do you whittle this down to, picking these topics?
It took 10 years. So the Blox would not have been possible without beta Blox being around and us needing that. So thankfully I went to a top 20 business school. So I got to see what a great business school is like. And there's lots of things that they do well, but then there's lots of places where they drop the ball. And then once I was able, like instinctually, I kind of knew that startups were different. And so you kind of attack it differently. Starting from nothing with no momentum and no rich parents and all this kind of stuff is very different than what they teach in business schools. Like there's this gritty, frugal, bootstrapping kind of thing, a shtick about getting a company off the ground that is just very different than what they're grooming businessmen in business school as opposed to business owners. Right. And eventually about a year or so into Beta Blox, and by the way, the first year of Beta Blox, I hired the CFO of Kansas City's largest engineering firm to teach the classes. Our mentors were all these old, white, gray-haired men that were from kind of corporate America. I built a business school and it wasn't good. And eventually I read The Lean Startup, and it took all the stuff that was instinctual in my head and it put to words. I mean, I remember exactly where I was, what way I was facing. There's like the clouds literally parted. It was a quasi-religious experience. It's almost like, oh my God, this is literally the answer to what I've been doing wrong. And I fired essentially everybody. And we replaced all the mentors with people that were about 5 years into business, roughly, that were making a couple $1 million or had raised a couple $1 million, as in they hadn't made it in the 80s or 90s. They weren't some corporate consultant. They were still, and that's an important fact, still at the helm of a growth stage venture. So they weren't super, super far along, but they were also definitively further than the people that were going to be mentoring. And so their advice was relevant. They still have a little bit of PTSD from the bootstrapping that they've had to do. So their advice is still very frugal. Like they're scared. They're almost scared to tell you to spend money. Right. And so all of a sudden, that's when things started taking off. Is when so the Lean Startup became like our primary day one version of a class. And then I went and found basically the Lean Startup of pay-per-click advertising, the Lean Startup of inbound marketing, the Lean Startup of fundraising. So I found all these like gritty, kind of niched early stage books written by the type of ladies and gentlemen that fit my thesis for doing consultation. And I just read and read and read. And anytime that I would find a particularly relevant chapter, I would kind of find ways to kind of add a slide about it, kind of move around the Lego pieces. I would listen to podcasts that were very relevant about the types of people that fit my thesis, and I would dissect them. I would pull quotes out. And so for a decade, I built all the curriculum, and it just got better and better and better every year. And then a couple of years ago, when we started to do the Blox, I then had to turn it into a game, which was also challenging, but it was way easier to start with all the classes and all this stuff. And then we turned it into a game. And what makes turning that into a game hard is making sure that they don't turn into cheesy participation trophy like workshops. Like we're not sitting around filling out a journal. We're not, you're in business school and they're like, okay, now for 30 minutes, break with 3 other people and fill this out and then like read it back. It's not like that. It's like we had to find a way to make sure that the exercises gave the entrepreneurs like a real rep at that topic without it being, some cheesy fill out a business model canvas or whatever. It's just that's how I created the curriculum. It took a long time, but I'm very proud of it.
You've literally hit the nail on the head in what it takes to start up a business and accelerate it, at such a high level and in such a fast pace. Like I left, just honestly, like, dang, why did I even go to business school, right? Because like I feel like I could have gone through that 7 days and been significantly more prepared for a startup, and because I'm still in the growth phases of my startup, and how we want to go from there. And I'll probably still be in the growth phase for another 5+ years with everything we want to do, and all the changes we want to make. So there's like a huge part of me that's just like, part of me, I'm glad I have the credibility from degrees, but I was like, man, if I could have gone through Wes's program, 7 years ago, I don't know if I necessarily would have done it, because, I've listened to a bunch of businessmen try to tell me how to own a company, and I can't tell you one of my professors actually went to own a business. Not a single one, and
Yeah.
and
Well,
I think it's sad.
one of the places where I had the spark to do what I did is I did have a couple that own businesses currently, and that is when you saw the difference. That was the spark. It's like, oh, this is how it's supposed to feel to learn, and it was like like a borderline sexual experience to be like, oh, this is why some people love school, because dang, I like really like this. Like I would look forward to class, and I would look forward to those conversations, and I would look forward to the homework and the tests. And then I thought to myself, I was like, man, could I create a business school where it really niche down to a very specific stage, which is startups, and kind of a very particular type of startups, and then make people feel like that before they show up to any and all kind of events and every time they get on the phone with us. And that's what we set out to do, is like a hyper relevant, hyper niched business school that that doesn't require 4 years and $100,000.
Right. And, and that's 4 years. Essentially, you're not really even making any money. You're not really progressing towards your goals or anything like that. So yeah, what you built is just amazing and phenomenal. And like I said, I didn't have a huge expectation going on the show. I thought it was going to be much more reality TV than, business. And it was quite the opposite. And, I was very, very pleased with how everything went. And, super excited to come back again. That's going to be amazing. Talk to some of the other guys. They already started blowing me up. And that's the biggest thing, is we all still talk. A lot of them are meeting up with each other. The guys that are, in Louisiana and Texas, Chicago, and me and Sam are going to meet up, and Natasha's coming out to do a comedy show I'm going to go to, and nice. It's literally like lifelong connections, and in 1 week, it's like you found kindred spirits, and that's so rare. So
I don't know. I love it. So for 10 years, I would love it when I would see like a post where some of our entrepreneurs would maybe go to a happy hour together or whatever, or go to each other's launch events, and those things have always been like signs that things are working. But it's only been in the last year or so that now that is happening all over the country. And that's really exciting. Like we're a year away from being able to have like a scheduled in-person meetup group in like the 20 biggest cities in the country without me being there, without charging it for anything. It's just like, okay, there's an LA one, a San Francisco one, a Chicago one, an Austin one. And I might like find like a leader of each group to kind of help coordinate when and where and all that kind of stuff. But how cool would it be if it was at the same time? Like everyone across the United States goes to their local meetup, on Thursdays at 6 p.m. or whatever. And then all across the United States, the continuation of the Blox program is happening in person. And I think that that's one of the long-term visions of this and the byproduct of all of it.
100%. I think a side effect that's going to have too is, like I said, there's ups and downs on entrepreneurship, and sometimes you don't have the right support group around you. Once a year, you're reminded why you want to do, what you're doing, in that, hey, everybody goes through these tough times, it's business, it's ups, downs, lefts, rights, everything. I think there's going to be a subsequent side effect of, I guess, attrition rate of the businesses that you coach is going to go significantly down. People aren't going to tap out as much. They're going to, because they have a huge support group. They have a bunch of people that are doing the exact same thing, being like, hey, no, like keep pushing, right?
You know what? One of the things though, the attrition rate, it happens, right? So it's like right now there's a great critical mass of people, but thankfully we've got new seasons coming up. So we're constantly adding new blood to it. But yes, some of the people will go out of business, but guess who some of the entrepreneurs then go and hire is some of the people that went out of business or they collaborate with or turn into contractors for. And so it's so cool because some of my most successful companies are filled with like Beta Blox alumni who didn't quite make it because my investment the baseline is I need 5% to hit. As in I'm of 95% failure rate is a big success for me because that 5% will make tens of millions of dollars at the finish line. And so I don't care how that 5% get there. If the 95% go out of business, but then they take all that knowledge and that camaraderie and the experience of failing and then join that 4 or 5 person company that is more poised for growth and help out the leader in that capacity. And then that guy makes it. That's a big win for us too.
100%, especially with the Beta Blox program, because essentially you don't get paid on it until they sell their company, right? Or some structured buyout, or we went over the whole I'm not gonna ruin anything season, but we covered this in our season of the Blox, so stay tuned for that one. But definitely. And to be honest, I think because when we showed up, I'm not gonna lie, there's a few people where I'm like, man, I don't know if they have what it takes. I'm looking around the room and I'm like, I don't know if they had the goal to go through the hard times. And, because we had people that were more successful than me, people that were just barely startups, it was all over the place. And by the time we left, I had a lot more confidence in every single person that was there for sure. Not that I'm anything better than any of them, just from me reading the room and being like, hey, I think this or this, this person might not make it. And, to watch some of them grow, like they couldn't even publicly speak, which is such a huge skill for an entrepreneur. Like, how are you going to address your staff if you can't publicly speak, right? And then you'll see them just thrive by day 5, and just be like, man, it was awesome. Like I can imagine what your view is, right? You have the 10,000 foot view of all of us. And like, I was submerged in it and, I was inspired. So how do you feel at the end of it?
It's like literally euphoric to watch people transform before your eyes. And everyone kind of came for different things that needed to be transformed. Like some people came with very specific questions that that are hard. Like they took a week of their life to get a couple of hard questions answered. And gosh darn, is it good to watch the light bulbs go off. The example you gave was some of the people had like really severe public speaking issues, and by the end of it were crushing speeches with cameras on them. And these aren't easy speeches. They're getting tested. We're testing them on their comprehension of brand new topics that we taught that day. And then there's other people that are just, I don't know, just you can just tell that their confidence or their clarity on where to go next, because they might have been a little stuck, is just they're just so excited. They're appreciative of what they're getting right now, but it's also like they're even more excited to go back to their business and implement it all. And it's just pretty special. I don't know. And the fact that we did that for 60 people is I don't know. It's hard to put a finger on how good that feels to like look out at a room that, I'm a small part of why their businesses have a higher likelihood of success. It's just such a turn on.
Yeah, I would imagine so. I mean, you're the man that made it all happen, right? Yeah, because what we did normally it was 20. We did significantly more. This last time we did 60. So how was that experience scaling it? Like, because that's a huge scale from one season to the next.
It took a year to prep for that level of scale, for sure. For sure. And then there's, and this, but your audience doesn't know this, but I'm a huge scientific method guy. I test everything. And because any number that I have in my head is just a guess. And so, yes, you went through a 60 person one. The one I'm doing next is a 70 person one. And the one I'm doing after that is a 40 person one. And all of those are maybe about 45. All of those are very specific numbers to where at the end of those, and then we're taking 3 months off. Because the idea is that by then I've got basically an ABC test, and I can tell with the one thing that's changed, which is the size, where was the most value provided? Did they need a little bit more? Did that extra attention in season, what will be 6, did that help? Did the more people, like just more humans, create more connections and more critical mass of the 71? Or is it like the Goldilocks and the 3 Bears were somewhere in the middle? And then I can compare that to seasons 1, 2, and 3 that basically was like 30, 25, 20. And now I've got 6 seasons at different sizes along the spectrum. And basically, whichever one of those is the most effective in various ways is more than likely going to be the number that we stick with from then on out. And then I'll start in the new year, I'm going to start testing new things. And what will start in the new year is how I take myself out. Not that I'm always going to be there, but like, how do I make it to where I don't want people to join for me. I want people to join for the IP, the networking, the platform. And so everything I'm going to start like replacing myself. And so I'm going to find a host, and then I'm going to find, notice how I wasn't a judge on your season and I was on the before. So I took myself out of that. And then I'm going to take myself out of the hosting spot. Then I'm going to take myself out of the teaching the class spot, and that's going to be a tough one because that's my favorite part. And it's but I have ideas, and then so that way this thing can, we all have to do that as entrepreneurs because we don't want ourselves to be a bottleneck in our own business, and because if everyone that comes to your gyms refuses to pay money to any of the other trainers, if it's not AJ, you're going to be capped at how much money you can make and how many people you can help. And so when I said the Bill Nye, I don't mean Wes Bergmann. I mean the Blox is the Bill Nye, and the attitude and the brand and the show is the Bill Nye. I'm gonna, in the new year, the thing that I'm gonna start to test is how can I take myself out, and I'll be there 24 hours a day, all this kind of stuff. But how do I make it that future seasons are joining, not for me, but to leave as happy as you left, but not join because Wes Bergmann is going to be all up in their grill all the time.
Right. Not join for the almost clout, join for the knowledge, and second, you don't want to be married to this thing, and you have to be until you get to that point, obviously. But the whole point of entrepreneurship, one, is to make a shit ton of money. That's obviously number one. But for me, it's just ultimately freedom, and I imagine that's a huge point for you as well. And obviously, we're never free. We're always responsible. We're always liable. But you're right. Like, if you don't have to be there 7 days a week, 10, 12-hour days, your life gets significantly, I guess we get enjoyment out of what we do, right? And that's why we do it. But
I found a really interesting quote, and I don't 100% agree with it, but it's worthwhile to bring up, which is a rich man has a lot of money and a wealthy man has a lot of money and a lot of time. And I guess that means I'm rich and not wealthy. There's other definitions of wealth that might be like net worth, that it's not necessarily cash in the bank, but ownership of assets, that kind of stuff. But I think that there's some truth there to where, like, right now, 7 days a week, 10 hours a day, that's not wealthy. I'm like, I'm
100%.
That's
because it's costing you your time.
Yeah, there's none of that. And also, like, what if it's true that I've built this crazy thing that's transforming people's lives and making their lives better and yada yada yada, but what if I get hit by a bus? And it's like, do I want that to die with me, or is the greatest gift that I can provide to this world kind of a set of processes and all my IP and basically a succession plan so that way it can live on without me. And then I can still do as much as I want, but I can also press a button and leave, AKA die or burn out or sell, where it's not on me. And I think that that's what I'm going to be testing in the new year on. And it's almost like weaning everybody off. It's like, okay, now I won't be first. I'm not the judge. Then I'm not the host. Then I'm not the professor. Then I'm not the director. And it's like one little thing at a time that I just won't be. Like the boss on my big show. He's a special forces military guy. He's turned the entire challenge into, he's a god amongst our group. And he just walks around, flip-flops, his presence just reminds people to do their job, but he's not actually doing anything. Now, and he's, he's monitoring everything, and that's why he gets paid the most, but the most to do the least, but enforcing like a philosophy on everyone. I've probably learned, he's like, I've learned a lot from watching him, and I want to be able to do the same type of thing where I'm still working in here. It's just, I would love to be able to empower someone that's maybe even a better natural professor to teach my curriculum, and whoever's maybe a better natural host to host, and then to keep doing have judges do the judging, and who's a better natural director do the directing, that kind of stuff. And then I can sit back and empower them individually. And theoretically, that means that it could run without me, but it also means that I can just I can spend more time making sure that all of them do their jobs at such an optimal level. And so I think that that's a little bit of my 2023 goals.
Awesome. So that's, coming up right around the corner. And that's amazing, because that's fully what we want to do as entrepreneurs is scale, consistent scaling. And that, logically, I think that's your next step is, being able to remove yourself. And then Travis has to hang up his Wes is lurking sign.
Well, I mean, the idea though is I'll still just be lurking.
Right.
I'll still be able. I don't see any way out of the lurking role, at least for a couple of years. 100%. But there's a difference between just incessant lurking versus, running the morning sessions, teaching the class, then lurking. And it's like, I want to just be lurking.
Right.
And then I can provide little tidbits and make sure, because that's how we scale.
Well, at that point, it's fun for you. Instead of it feeling like work, which obviously it still is work, but at least now you get to just enjoy the process. You built it, you got it to the point of critical mass where now this thing just took off on its own, and now you just get to sit back and just, admire your work. Right. And that's an amazing feeling.
It's fun right now. It's a lot of fun.
Right. But
fun doesn't begin to describe it. You're right.
I saw the bags start building up under your eyes by day 6, by the time we were leaving, I'm pretty sure you needed like 12 hours of sleep after that, and that was, I felt like I got hit by a bus and I wasn't as active as you in any extent, so I can only imagine what you feel. Yeah. But it was fun. It was so much fun.
Well, I don't know a way to transform people's lives without being that hard, right? Like, I hate seeing, like, let's call it other workshops or retreats or business incubators that use words like change people's lives and transformation, all this kind of stuff, and don't have it be incredibly hard. Like, I mean, there's a reason why military has boot camps, and they break your ass down before they're able to build you up. And they're not doing so maliciously. They're doing so just because that's what works. And that's the most accelerated way to teach somebody something in a way that sticks forever. And so, there's a lot of truth to, we have taken principles from the military and how we run the whole operation, including the educational side.
100%. And the whole thing is you get all these people that are arguably alpha type, or you have to be egotistical at some point, to be an entrepreneur, I believe. And, you have to make them vulnerable for them to even be willing to learn, or willing to accept new ideas and new theories and new concepts. It's really hard for us, and in general, me at least, I can't speak for all entrepreneurs, but for me, and that was 100% like the competition aspect, I know, really improves the show, but I also think it improves it for a lot of us too, because, there's something on the line. You're creating buy-in, and bragging rights is, what's on the line. And, obviously the knowledge is the prize that you're getting, but, that still means something to most entrepreneurs, right? Is like, hey, we don't go to do something. We go to dominate. We don't simply just, we just don't accept, what 99% of the world accepts ultimately.
Yeah.
And speaking of not accepting what 99% of the world does, let's talk about how you get ready for the challenge. And you and I had some great conversations in your gym at your house about this. And, I think it's a real, obviously we don't want to give any proprietary secrets away, right? Because you still got some challenges to win here. But you said some, like, you said one powerful thing where you're like, look, I have to go wrestle this monster. and then run an ultra marathon by the end of it. And those are two significantly different goals, right? So, obviously without giving away, don't give anybody else on the show an edge, but, walk us through a little bit.
Yeah. The challenge really, it started as this like party spinoff of the real world, and that was kind of cute, and without it there would be nothing of what it is today. But on the 12th season, and they're on their 37th has aired, and then there's been spinoffs and stuff, so it's been over 40 challenges. So on the 12th one is when that guy took over, and he was ahead of his time. It's with the special forces guy, and he had this vision of turning it into a sport. And that vision, he didn't jam down Hollywood's throat, thankfully, because they didn't see that vision. So he just made it a little harder every season until MTV had no clue that he had just built like a military-esque sport underneath their fucking umbrella, and on accident, and the viewers loved it. And now it's like syndicated all over the world. There's Challenge Australia, Challenge Argentina, Challenge United Kingdom, Challenge USA. There's stuff on streaming stuff. There's straight to the internet stuff. And then now, for the first time ever, the winners of all of those things are all getting together sometime in the fall to compete in a global tournament. So whoever won each of all those things from across the world is going to compete against each other in this thing. And this thing is basically like, there's the dailies, the eliminations, and the finals. Those are the stuff that are tested. The dailies are stuff like you have to jump out of a helicopter, and while jumping out of the helicopter, you have to memorize a puzzle that is like maybe in the lake, and then swim across the lake and recreate the puzzle on the dock. Like that's an example of something that I did last time. Or they'll put you on a moving train, and you'll have to like climb across the train as it's going, and then memorizing puzzle pieces along the way. Or like scaffold down a building, or all sorts of stuff that tests strength and intelligence and focus and heights and balance. And then when you go to the house, there's all these politics associated with it, where you have to choose who goes into the elimination, who you're aligning with. And in those eliminations, you get this basically two people could potentially go home, and they have to battle against each other in some sort of a sand pit. And there's only so much creativity that you can do before you have to, ultimately you wrestle. There are various forms of it. Like the most famous one is called pole wrestle. They put a fucking stick in the ground. You both put your hands on it, and whoever ends up with the stick wins. And wow. I was the first male to do that. And I made it famous. Like you can go back. It's like one of the people, it was still backyard games, and they were expecting things to be, and all of a sudden this Justin producer guy is his name. He puts a stick in the ground and puts me against this like wrestler. And I was like, I'm going to fuck this guy up. I'm going to take that stick from him. We're rolling around and fighting. And it is just crazy. And that was one of the wake up calls to the audience of, it's like, holy shit, this whole like road rules versus real world thing is kind of going away. So, and then in the final, so I'll just kind of, you go through the dailies, which are kind of more intense, the eliminations, which are like one-on-one, all just to get the honor of running the final, which is essentially an ultra marathon, where you'll run anywhere between 20 and like 50 miles, where you'll stop and have to have these intense eating things and the intense like puzzles and just random little games, because it's not a running show, but there's just a ton of running at the end. And so when you ask yourself, like, how do you train for something like that? And a lot of times these guys, they go to all in on, they think about the pole wrestle stuff, or the hall brawl is like a football one that they do, and they get really jacked. And don't get me wrong, that will help you not lose and get to the end. But then they're so strong and they're so big, but they spent all this time on their strength, and then when it comes to the ultra marathon, they can't finish, let alone win. And so the ultimate answer of how and so it's not proprietary, it's just, they know it, they just don't have the discipline necessarily to do it, is just to be really fucking well-rounded. As in, you have to have a good combination of cardiovascular fitness and strength, and preferably athleticism. But by the time you're 30, if you don't have that, it's going to be kind of hard to
develop that, yeah.
Train for that, So hopefully you can have some of the balance and the ball skills and all that kind of stuff is natural. And then your real goal to train for the challenge is a healthy combination of strength and cardiovascular fitness. And so that's what I do is I have a system where I try and get as strong as I can while simultaneously being able to run faster and faster. Let's call them half marathon times. Because if you can run a good half marathon, you can run a decent marathon. And so that's a little bit about what I do. So it's just a lot of running, it's a lot of lifting, and very functional lifting, right? Like I'm not doing bicep curls. Not that there's anything wrong. Like I used to do a bit of bodybuilding, and that's a sport. You do it, it's fun, it's fulfilling, it's healthy. But bicep curls, for as an example, won't help me win a challenge or won't help me really fuck some guy up in the sand as much as squats and overhead presses and Turkish get-ups and farmers carries. And so it's basically like the big 10 compound lifts and then some of the really good functional full body. Like I love the Turkish get-ups. I love the farmers carries. So I augment with like the full body kind of painful things. And then in the running situation, I follow what's called the 80-20 rule, where 80% of my runs are really at an in zone 2 heart rate, which is not much faster than a walk, like a very slow jog. And then 20% of my runs, I skip zone 3 and get into zone 4 and 5, which is like
Hit cardio
really,
session.
really challenging. Because the idea is that where most people fuck up is they go out for runs and they sit in zone 3, which is like the no man's land. It's not fast enough to make you faster and better, but it's fast enough to hurt your recovery. So the idea is you melt in zone 2, which is hardly anything most of your week. And then your heart gets strong, but it doesn't need to recover really because you didn't go that hard. And then 20% of your runs, aka maybe 1.5 times a week, you fuck your heart up and you go balls to the wall. And then your heart says, okay, I kind of need a week to recover from this. And by the time then you do those 80% really basic runs in the recovery part while you're still kind of working on your cardiovascular fitness. And then the next Monday or Tuesday comes around and you fuck your heart up again. And then your body will adapt to that hard 20%. Meanwhile, that 80% is just like your baseline, and it's like almost like recovery runs. And so that's a little bit of my process for the lifting and the running, and I try and do a good, healthy combination of both.
Oh, awesome! Sounds like you got it nailed down. You know, it's almost like it's a military style training. You know, it's similar to what we do before we deploy, which is awesome. Obviously, you and I touched base on this. This was significantly more for the viewers and for you guys to get, you know, a kind of, you see him on TV, right? You see him doing this crazy stuff, hanging off a skyscraper with a bungee cord, trying to wrestle some guy. You know, it takes a different level of fitness, and the functional movements are super significant in that, in life in general. You know, if you want to live a healthy life, you need to do functional lifts. But awesome. I don't want to take up too much more of your time. So I have 2 more questions for you. The first being, what if you had to, you know, give somebody that maybe wanting to start a business any advice? You know, maybe they're at their seed stage where they're, you know, developing the seed. What advice would it be?
I would read the Lean Startup, which is really going to tell you to test all your assumptions, to start earlier than you want to with a smaller kernel of things. So start cheaper, start smaller, have less features, do less. You don't need some big fancy thing to find versions of what you do in small capacities, but just start. And I just overly simplified the best startup and entrepreneurship book of all time into a couple of sentences, but that's the gist of it, is to start small with as little over as possible. But if you do it in a disciplined capacity, you can test a lot of your assumptions from day one, right? Like with you, for example, if I was AJ years ago starting a gym, I could start tomorrow by starting virtual personal training services and go to people's houses. That would allow me to start building up some of my curriculum, some of my client base while I'm building up the money required. Well, then I go and scout locations to have brick and mortar facilities. And then when I launch, guess what? I've got the curriculum, I've got the clients already. I just fill it up. And so the idea is that whatever you're building, there's a version of that where you can start tomorrow, and that will allow you to learn and create momentum. So that's what I would do. That's the best advice I got.
100%. I think a big thing to touch base on that is too many people will have this great idea and they want to skip those steps. They want to skip the basic steps, right? They're too good for it, or they're perfectionists and everything needs to be perfect, and they just never end up pulling the trigger. So I think that's great advice, because that's what I see I get people come to me, dozens of times a week. Oh man, I got this. I can't even go to the bars in my hometown anymore because everybody pulls me aside with their, next good startup idea. But, and none of them follow through, and so I completely agree with that. Lastly, for entrepreneurs that do want to get on the Blox, how do they get on? Obviously I know, but if you have to give them some advice, on going through your process, what you're looking for.
Well, so we use, so you would go to betablox.com/casting, and we're going to have about 50,000 people that go to that page and fill that form out this year. So I'm going to give you some advice, but it's still challenging, and we're going to do it hopefully 8 times this year. So there's spots. It's just, I have to set the bar at a sufficient height.
Well, 1%.
Part of the magic though is the curation. Why this worked is you don't let everyone in. And that's not true for all businesses. Most businesses, you take everyone's money. With here, this matters so much to find the AJ out of the 99 other that don't have anything really to contribute to the group. And so what we use different modalities, which is, it starts with just some very basic information. We use that and deny half the people. Then we ask very, very important questions to us via what we call the questionnaire that helps us kind of establish kind of when in the process you are. And then we deny half the people. Then we have you do a video submission where we've got software that collects kind of important, different answers, but now we get to see you perform on camera a bit. Nothing more fancy than a webcam, but we get to see you talk and think through questions. And then another half the people are denied. Then you've got a one-on-one phone call with a casting director. And then I come in and I look at all this. Basically, the casting directors are filling out their own versions of rubrics at each of these steps, and the top point scores win. The ones that are on the buffer line, I come in and then I audit everything. Because the crazy high point scores, I don't even care. Let them in. Those are obvious. But the ones that are on the line, it's like I go in, I watch all the stuff, I read all the stuff, I stalk them. Sometimes I have to do extra phone calls, and then I make executive decisions from there. And then a bunch of people get denied after that step too. But it's possible. I mean, there's 60 people that were on your season, so it's not like there's 3 spots to get on this whatever. It's like there are spots, but we're looking for people that are not entrepreneurs. Like that's like the big thing. Like, are you doing your thing, or is there damn good proof that you're about to? And then we look for like somebody that can communicate what they're learning, because the viewers need to learn alongside you. And if you're some genius entrepreneur but you can't kind of let the viewer in, then it ruins the point of the show, because the point of the show is to kind of narrate what you're learning. And if you suck at narrating, then the viewer loses. And I want everyone to win, you and the viewer. So those are the things that we're kind of looking for. Awesome.
And I would encourage all of you, if you are an entrepreneur, obviously, if you're just trying to get 5 minutes of fame, don't apply, because Wes is going to weed you out. What most people don't know about Wes is he's insanely meticulous, and everything's documented, and he's a ginger genius, but he might be a ginger lunatic with his spreadsheets, right? So if you're looking for 5 minutes of fame, do not apply for this. But if you have a serious, I would highly encourage anybody that actually wants to start a business or has started their business, and maybe you're just drawing blanks on what to do next, or because like we said, you don't have many people you could bounce it off of. Definitely apply for the show. If you don't make it on the first time, fix some of the stuff, apply again, right? If you don't get on that time, fix some of the stuff, apply again. Continue to do it, because that's what entrepreneurship is. It's facing rejection with a smile and coming back in a different, better way that's more effective. Wes, thank you so much, man. This has been such a fun. You and I could go on for hours, but you're busy.
Easily.
And I definitely don't want to take up too much of your time. Your time's insanely valuable. Thank you so much for coming on the show. To all the viewers, thank you guys so much for watching. Stay tuned for the next episode. Have a good day.
Bye.